What's up, friends? My name's Wilucco, and today I want to tell you 5 things that I wish I knew before getting started in Last Epoch. The first thing to know is that the in-game guide is actually very good, and it has a lot of really in-depth information in it while still being well written enough to be understandable for new players, and even with multiple characters in the endgame, I find myself referencing it pretty often. The second thing you should know about is the Glyph of Hope. When you're using the very powerful crafting system in Last Epoch to make very powerful items, there's one little thing you should add to as many of your crafts as possible, and that is the Glyph of Hope. When you open up the crafting panel, you'll see a big circle at the bottom that shows which affix shard that you're trying to add onto your gear, and above that you'll see a little diamond that you can click on that lets you pick from your selection of glyphs. The first one in that list is the Glyph of Hope, and what it does is it gives all of your crafts a 25% chance to not consume forging potential. Now, 1 in 4 may not be the best chances for this glyph to have any effect, but getting a lucky proc or 2 during the crafting process of a really good item in the endgame can make all the difference in the world when you're trying to max out all of its affixes. The other good thing about Glyphs of Hope is that they drop like candy pretty much everywhere, so there's no reason not to use them at every opportunity that you can. Tip number 3 is about something called Numlock Autocasting. It's not something that's useful for every single build, but there are some builds that have abilities that want to be cast on cooldown with as little delay as possible, and this is just a handy little trick to make that easier. To use Numlock Autocasting, all you have to do is reassign the keybind for whatever ability you want to use on cooldown to one of the keys on your numpad. And then when you go to use that ability, you press and hold the button that you assigned, and then you turn off Numlock. Once the numlock is off, you can let go of the key, and you'll find that the ability button is still darkened as if it's being held down. Now, this isn't exactly intended behavior for how ability casting works, but the devs have specifically stated that it's not something that's like a bannable offense, or it's not really an exploit. The only thing they've said regarding Numlock Autocasting is that they would rather design skills in a way that makes it so that Numlock Autocasting doesn't feel necessary. That being said, there are still some skills that do feel better that way. Like just before Cycle 1.1 started, I was playing a Devouring Orb Void Knight, which requires you to cast Devouring Orb on cooldown, and without Numlock Autocasting, that build would have felt 10 times worse than it actually was with it. So like I said, it's not something that's useful for every single build, but if you're playing a build that needs abilities cast on cooldown, it's a nice trick to have. Tip number 4 is that you don't actually need to finish the campaign in order to enter the Monolith of Fate endgame system. Technically, the earliest you can enter Monoliths is around level 15 in the campaign when you go to the End of Time for the first time and pick out your mastery class. From there, if you just walk from the waypoint to the right, you'll be able to find the monoliths. You'll just find that the monsters in the very first monolith, where they're as low as they can possibly be, is level 58. So until your character is strong enough to handle level 58 monsters, which for some builds is pretty early, that's really the only thing stopping your progression into that system. If you do decide to start monoliths early, there's one thing you should keep in mind, and that's at some point you will have to go back and do at least part of the campaign in order to get all 15 possible passive points and 8 idle inventory expansion slots. These only come from quests in the campaign, so in order to maximize your character power, at some point you will have to go out and do all these. Thankfully, if you do all of the side quests that give the inventory expansions and the passive points, you should be able to get all 15 and 8 by about the start of Act 8, which is still most of the campaign, but it lets you skip out of the rest of Act 8 and the entirety of Act 9. So it's still a lot, just not as much as it could be. Tip number 5 is for when you do get started in Monoliths and you're working your way up to Empowered Monoliths with their juicy level 100 monsters and corruption and all that business. But your first time through the lower level Monoliths, you should focus on going through the Monoliths on the right side first. That's because the monsters in the ones on the right are higher level than the monsters in the ones on the left. And the other reason is that when you go through the Monoliths and you fight the bosses at the end, you get these buffs called blessings, and the blessings from the right side monoliths are all character power boosts like health regen or crit multiplier or stuff like that actually affects your character, while the ones on the left side are all things that influence drop rates for various things like uniques or gold or experience or different affix shards. So the left side is still useful, but if you're trying to get your character as strong as possible, as quick as possible, not only do you get more XP for higher level monsters, but your character gets stronger just for finishing the monoliths. Once you enter empowered monoliths, of course, they're all level 100, so it doesn't really matter as far as monster level and experience is concerned. But when you're starting empowered monoliths, it may be better to focus on the right side buffs as well, just to get better versions of all the power boosts. So there you have it. Those are 5 things I wish I knew when I started Last Epoch. If you have any questions about any of them, or anything at all, feel free to leave them in the comments. If you found the video helpful, make sure you like it and subscribe to my channel. And if you want more helpful videos for beginners in Last Epoch, then make sure you check out this playlist over here. I'll see you next time.